It was 4 a.m. in Ouagadougou. The city still slept, wrapped in silence, when a gunshot cracked the air like a lightning strike. A man staggered in the shadows. Not just any man, but the legendary guardian who once stood beside Muammar Gaddafi himself. For years, he had carried the scars of battles most could only whisper about, and now he served at the side of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the fiery young leader who had become the heartbeat of Burkina Faso's revolution. But this night was different. This night the enemy crept closer, determined to pierce the shield that protected Traoré. The question was not just who had fired the shot, but why now? And what message did this attack carry for Africa's newest symbol of defiance? The story of the man attacked at 4 a.m. cannot be told without returning to another time, another leader, and another battlefield of ideas. Long before he stood guard beside Captain Ibrahim Traoré, he had once pledged his loyalty to the man who symbolized defiance across the African continent, Muammar Gaddafi. To understand why the attack shook not just Burkina Faso, but the imagination of those who still believe in resistance, one must first understand the weight of such loyalty, the kind of loyalty that cannot be bought or forced but forged in fire and blood. Gaddafi did not trust easily. Yet when he did, he demanded more than protection. He demanded devotion, and in return, he made his protectors part of his myth. These men, and in some cases women, were trained to embody strength, discipline, and an unyielding commitment to shield their leader with their very lives. Among them was a man whose path would later cross with the young captain of Burkina Faso. He had witnessed not only the rise of Libya under Gaddafi, but also its fall. He saw how a leader once feared and admired by millions was hunted, betrayed and killed in the chaos of foreign intervention. He survived that collapse, carrying not just physical scars but memories too heavy for ordinary men. While many scattered, he carried forward the legacy of loyalty, searching for a cause that still made sense in a continent where leaders who refused submission were rare. When he found Traoré, it was not by accident. Something in the Burkinabe leader's fiery words, his bold defiance against France and Western control, reminded him of Gaddafi. To him, this was not just another assignment. It was a second chance to protect a vision that echoed the one he had once defended in Tripoli. In Burkina Faso, the presence of this bodyguard carried more than practical meaning. To the ordinary citizen, he was just another shadow moving around the captain. But to those who understood history, he was a living reminder that Africa's struggle is continuous. He represented a bridge between two generations of defiance, one that had been silenced in Libya, and another now rising in Ouagadougou. This was why the attack at 4 a.m. mattered. It was not merely the targeting of one man. It was a strike against the symbolism of continuity, a message meant to rattle not just Traoré's security but the idea that Gaddafi's dream could find rebirth in West Africa. The man himself was not naive. He knew his position made him a marked target. In whispered conversations, he often told comrades that true loyalty demanded accepting death as part of the job. Yet he also believed his survival in Libya was for a reason. Each time he stood beside Traoré during speeches, watching the crowd erupt in chants against neo-colonialism, he felt the echoes of Tripoli's squares, when Gaddafi declared Africa should belong to Africans alone. For him, protecting Traoré was more than work. It was redemption, the unfinished business of history. The attack was carefully timed. Only someone who studied patterns would choose that hour. 4 in the morning is when even guards lower their guard, when exhaustion seeps in, when silence dominates. It is a time of transition, when night begins to surrender to dawn. The enemy knew this, and the enemy struck then. That decision tells us something about the attackers. They were not amateurs. They were patient, calculating, and willing to risk everything to send a message. The target was not just the bodyguard's flesh, but his symbolism. By attacking him, they sought to declare that no loyalty, no legacy, no bridge between past and present could stand in the way of those determined to silence Africa's new revolutionaries. Yet, what they underestimated was the resilience of a man shaped by decades of storms. The man who had once stood in the crossfire of Libya's collapse did not break easily. Though wounded, he fought back. his instincts guiding him in the darkness. It was not just muscle memory. It was the unshakable discipline of a soldier who had spent his life knowing that every day could be his last. And while he fought for his survival in that pre-dawn chaos, he carried something larger than his own life, the responsibility of protecting a young captain, who now symbolized hope to millions of Africans disillusioned with old systems of control. Whispers spread quickly through the capital. Some said foreign agents were involved, determined to weaken Traoré's inner circle. Others hinted at internal betrayal, the kind of jealousy and ambition that has toppled leaders before. But in every version of the story, one truth remained unshaken. This was not just an attack on a man, but on an idea. The idea that Africa could raise leaders who refused submission, leaders who drew strength from the past yet walked toward a new dawn. That is why people spoke of the incident with a mixture of fear and reverence. Fear, because it showed how far enemies were willing to go. Reverence, because even in blood, the bodyguard embodied a loyalty rare in these times. The attack became a mirror reflecting the wider battlefield on which Burkina Faso stood, surrounded by enemies, threatened by terrorism, pressured by foreign governments. The young captain's government knew danger was never far. But to strike at the one man carrying Gaddafi's legacy into Traoré's era was to cross into symbolic warfare. It was a declaration that the fight was not only about borders or resources, but about memory and meaning. Those who orchestrated the attack understood that symbols can be more powerful than armies. To break a symbol is to shake the faith of the people who believe in it. That was their goal. But like Gaddafi before him, Traoré understood that symbols cannot be killed so easily. For ordinary Burkinabe citizens, the story spread in hushed voices, fueling both fear and determination. Some said the man's survival was proof that history itself refused to die. Others argued that his blood was a warning, reminding the nation that Traoré's path would not be easy, that each day ahead would test not just his strength but the will of the people who supported him. Either way, the incident became part of the nation's narrative, whispered in markets, debated in tea houses, retold on radio programs. It was no longer about the man alone. It was about what he represented. And so, in the early light of dawn, when the city awoke to news of the attack, there was a sense of reckoning. The story was not just about bullets and blood, but about whether Burkina Faso could carry forward a dream many believed had been buried with Gaddafi. It was about whether loyalty, in its purest form, could still exist in a world where betrayal seemed to dominate politics. It was about whether a young leader, watched over by a guardian forged in Libya's storms, could stand against the tides threatening to drown Africa's hope once more. The attack at 4 a.m. was not an ending. It was a beginning,